Hi, Alex. This is a great start to the handout, and I think you've really captured the essence of this method. So, a couple things that I'm going to ask you to reconceive of. First, I'd like the handout to get to a much quicker start. I think maybe 2 sentences, introduction. You may have been told that you have some wordy writing, and we are going to present a method for recognizing the writing and fixing it. Then I would like to see this broken down into 2 levels. Let me show you in this comment over here. So I think what we want is level 1 would be recognizing unnecessarily wordy writing. We could say bloated writing. You can use some other word if you like a different word. But this is first recognition. And I think there's 3 ways, and correct me if I'm wrong, 3 ways to recognize it. So you can recognize it through lots of prepositions. And I'd like you to explain on the handout why prepositions are a problem. And the reason that they're a problem is that every preposition is a cognitive burden. It's a relationship. And as we get multiple prepositions, these become multiple relationships that the reader has to keep in mind. So prepositions place a cognitive burden on the reader. To be verbs are often the sign of writers who have not identified the main action. To be verbs are weak verbs, and they may, and a lot of times writers can be more concise, more powerful, less bloated if they choose the stronger verbs. And nominalizations, those are nouns that are really verbs. So in level 1, first of all, recognizing it. If you notice a lot, some of these things you probably need to revise. And part of the goal in revision should be to reduce, to get rid of these things. Then level 2 are the strategies for revising. So first strategy is identify the agent in action. You could use subject and verb. Those are maybe a little bit more technical, or sometimes students are like, oh, I never got that. I never quite understood what those are. So agent in action is a way around that. I'm not tied to these. But things to realize, and you already have this in here, that the agent could be implied. It's often not necessarily stated. And the action could be a nominalization. And I'll go through an example here. Then we want to start off the sentence by putting the agent and action close together, then prune the prepositions. And then if there's other advice that you're seeing from your research on the paramedic method, go ahead and include it. But I think this gives us some key steps here. Let me show you, if we look at this comment down here, this is an excerpt from a student paper. This was the one that was like, oh my God, we really need this handout. So I'm going to do the second sentence in here. In determining the definition of disability, there hardly exists an unmodifiable and historically consistent standard, but rather I'll let you finish reading that. So after looking at it, I figured out that the subject, the agent, is the definition of disability. Whoops, sorry about that. Definition of disability is what this sentence is about. So the definition of disability, and then the action is depends. So here's a nominalization, dependent, and the action is depends. So if we change this and we started off with the definition of disability depends not on an unmodifiable and historically consistent standards, but on the cumulative views, the majority, which is subject to change. That makes a lot more sense. So this could be an example that you need to rewrite it because we don't have permission to use the student's writing. But this is a good example of things that require the paramedic method. You have some good examples at the beginning up here. The one I liked best was number 5 here. I think this is relevant to a lot of our students. It's more technical and would be really useful for some of these students. I also thought number 2 is a good one to kind of get started. It's a more simple one. You might even just end it here. The decision by the managers was that the Committee for Road Improvement would cease its activities, and just make the case that managers as the agent, decide is the action. So this is a good example of nominalization. And then we have some additional stuff that we can do once we get the managers decided. Venus and Adonis is also a good one if you didn't steal it from somebody else. It's a good example of a nominalization. So instead of contrary, it would be contradict. So though I think I would rewrite this as Adonis's rejection of Venus's unflagging courtship contradicts Ovid's account in Metamorphosis. It contradicts both the original Greek myth and Ovid's version. Okay. Last thing, I prefer not to give the advice to use active voice. I think that sets up some contradictions, and plus, if we follow the other things, it takes care of the passive voice anyway. So if we look at this example, here we have a to be word and a preposition that we don't need. So that so passive voice just becomes maybe a little bit redundant here. I think this is a really good example, and I like some of the technical examples. I like the flaw in this theory and Cobalt's properties as good examples. So overall, I think this is excellent, and I think that the handout might look something like this with sort of 2 main sections of recognition and then fixing. But you're off to a great start here, and I really look forward to seeing how this progresses. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great weekend.